if you follow the liturgical calendar, you know that sort of the first half of the year goes from Advent to Christmas to Epiphany in through the life of Jesus, the season of the Holy Spirit coming, Pentecost. We get Lent and Easter and resurrection. And then you have that whole second half of the year is what they call ordinary time. And in a certain sense, the first half of the year is focusing on Jesus, and the second half of the year focuses on the people of God and their discipleship and formation in the way of Jesus. And then it starts again the next year. So you're orienting you're orienting your year around the person of Christ and our response to the person of Christ.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Three Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. My name is Phil Schiavone with the Coalition for Christian Outreach, the CCO, where we're transforming college students to transform the world. And with me, of course, from Hearts and Minds Bookstore, Byron Borger himself, the man, the myth, the legend, the host of this podcast. Byron, how are you doing?
Okay, Phil, how can I not be okay after you say such exclamatory things there? That's kind of fun and funny. Thank you. You're the host. I'm the guest. I don't know. I'm a host. You're a guest. We talk books together, and you can't go wrong with that. So thanks for doing this.
Well, thank you, Byron. We're coming right off the heels of Thanksgiving together. Do you have any unique Thanksgiving celebrations or things that you do for Thanksgiving?
Nope, not a thing. My wife has breast cancer, and she just started her chemo treatments. And so we did not plan any food at all, nothing. And two of our kids live out of town, and we don't have any dear relatives that are nearby. So, yeah, I read books, and she watched the dog show, and that's fine.
That was good.
We're thankful for a lot of stuff. We're thankful for a whole lot of stuff. But, in terms of the traditional kind of Thursday stuff, we just didn't do much. And then, of course, the next day, that Friday after, Black Friday, they call it, was our store's 43rd anniversary. We opened on Black Friday, 1982. And the very first book we sold, the very first day, the first book ever, was a novel by Victor Hugo called Les Miserables. They eventually made it into the famous musical Les Mis, but this was even before Les Mis was a thing. And the fact that we had it was pretty cool. The fact that that was the first book we sold, we thought it was a sign from God that our kind of wonky plan to have this hybrid store that was going to be somewhat of a Christian bookstore, but perhaps more broadly than Christian bookstores were understood to be in those years. And so when we sold Les Mis that first day, we thought this is going to be fun. And so that was something we celebrated on Friday as the anniversary of our store. So that's kind of neat.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, we're grateful, of course, for you and for Hearts and Minds. We're grateful for Beth, and we'll all certainly be praying for her and her progress with her cancer diagnosis. We hear on this end board games, which I used to have a bunch stacked behind me, but they're stacked over here now. Board games have always been a part of our Thanksgiving that's pretty unique to us, and we. You always see the Thanksgiving trope of like people getting into it on the holidays, the family fight over politics or something like that. We have this infamous fight. We were playing Pictionary of all things, Pictionary, and my cousin drew me a picture of like a pitcher pouring water. I said pour, and my aunt got on his case because it was like a pore, like in your skin, and was it pour or pour? And did I say the right word pour? That was 30 years ago. And it still comes up. We have these heated Trivial Pursuit matches and Pictionary, and like it's just become, not only tradition but folklore at this point of like just how into it.
Folklore, the fight over the words. Scrabble definitions, is that really a word? Yep, I hear you. Is it just your family, or do you have extended family that come together?
It's a mix now that we're married, right? So we'll alternate my mom's side of the family and then Lindsay's side of the family, and so go back and forth. This year was actually with Lindsay's side of the family, but my daughters carry the tradition of wanting to play board games with me when we're not with my mom. So
fantastic. That's nice. That's good.
With that, we transition, right? We transition from Thanksgiving to an important season of our faith, one that my faith background has never really lent towards a more kind of high church liturgical way of going about things, but thankful for the CCO and for you for highlighting these things to me. And I believe you've got a couple books to highlight sort of the calendar side of our faith.
That's exactly right. I'm going to list three books that I know I have mentioned before here at the Hearts and Minds podcast. And for what it's worth, if anybody's interested, I mean, I think if you're watching this podcast, we're grateful for it. Put some comments in the links if you want. But I did another hour-long podcast about books about Advent that are useful for the Advent season through a Christian study center at the University of Wisconsin in Madison called Upper House. And they have a great podcast. They bring in great speakers and authors, and then they have me on every couple of times a year talking about books. So I did an hour-long podcast talking about Christmas and books for the holidays and seasonal titles that are particularly leaning into Advent. So if this whets your appetite at all, you could find that podcast too, wherever you get your podcasts. But for this one, we're just going to do three, and they're books I've mentioned before. But I am so fond of these books, Phil. I just love these authors. I love these little books. They're hand-sized, kind of compact, kind of thin. If you're watching, you can see how skinny they are. And they are on the season. So these are not your typical Advent or Christmas devotionals where you read a page a day or flip a calendar or something. They're kind of about the liturgical season and why, particularly, like you say, for those of us that didn't grow up with a heavy-handed kind of liturgical calendar, how this can shape our faith in profound and good ways. There are a couple of daily devotionals that walk you through a whole year of the whole Christian calendar. And when you think about the Christian calendar, for those of you that know anything about the liturgical year, it starts with Advent. Our new year, as the church does not start on January 1st, it starts around December 1st as we celebrate the first Sunday of Advent. Some of us light those Advent candles, the 4 candles. And speaking of that, by the way, parenthetically, the Bible Project has 4 really good videos on the 4 weeks of Advent and the symbolic candle names: peace, joy, love, and of course, hope is the first one. Hope, peace, joy, and love. And those are great little personal devotions, educational times, Sunday school times. So watch those Bible Project things if this is all new to you. But if you follow the liturgical calendar, you know that sort of the first half of the year goes from Advent to Christmas to Epiphany, in through the life of Jesus, the season of the Holy Spirit coming, Pentecost. We get Lent and Easter and Resurrection. And then you have the whole second half of the year is what they call ordinary time. And in a certain sense, the first half of the year is focusing on Jesus, and the second half of the year focuses on the people of God and their discipleship and formation in the way of Jesus. And then it starts again the next year. So you're orienting you're orienting your year around the person of Christ and our response to the person of Christ. So anyway, I love the liturgical year and thinking about that. And most of us, even if you're not highly liturgical and wanting to do the whole year, everybody likes Advent. At least everybody likes preparing for Jesus. So I'm going to tell you first about this little book called Advent. It's part of a series of books edited by Esau McCulley, African-American scholar at Wheaton and an Anglican priest, has helped do some of the training for CCO. We love his work. Esau edited this series of books called The Fullness of Time. And this is the first one in the Fullness of Time series, and it's simply called Advent. It is by Tish Harrison Warren, another woman who has been helpful with the CCO and spoken at our Jubilee conferences. Tish Harrison Warren's a great, great writer, and her husband helped a little bit with this, Jonathan, and they put together this little reader about what the Advent series is about. Of course, the first chapter is called Yearning. That we all have these yearnings, these longings, these desires. And who doesn't want Christmas to come? Who doesn't long for a better world? Who doesn't want Jesus to return? And so she kind of starts with this notion of yearning and how Advent is a time to tap into our longing and our hopes and our expectations. At our church yesterday we sang, "Come thou long expected Jesus," that great Charles Wesley hymn, coming to set our people free. We've been in captivity like the Jews in exile, and we're longing to go home for that to happen. And she notes in this first chapter that in a certain sense, there's 3 comings of Christ. There was the coming historically. He really was born, and we tend to focus on that we celebrate the nativity, the creche sets, the angel stories, the shepherds, and so forth. And so in history, it really did happen. And so we celebrate and commemorate Advent past. And of course, we have in that wonderful hymn, Let Christ Be Born in Us Today. We want Christ to show up now, to be present in our life, to work on our union with Christ, and in the power of his Spirit, live faithfully in the way of Jesus. And so Jesus is showing up day by day as we walk with him and talk with him. And so there's a current, present day kind of Advent where we long for his presence in the ordinary of daily life. And then there is this third Advent that we often miss. And liturgical churches have lectionary readings that remind us of this in the Christmas season. It almost feels a little counterintuitive, but that is the second coming of Christ. That Jesus already came. He's being born in our life daily. But what hasn't happened yet is the final chapter of the grand epochal story, the epoch of the restoration of all things, this grand narrative that will come to fruition someday in a consummation of all things being renewed. And so we look for this cosmic story of the hope of redemption as Christ's restoration breaks into human history finally in that last great day. And so what Advent really does is remind us who Jesus was, that he came once, and that we yearn for him to be born in us anew today, but yet that we're really longing in this now and not yet present for the fullness of time when he comes again. So that's the beginning of her book, the yearning for the three Advents of Christ. She moves on to longing and looks at themes of Advent. She looks at crying out, the prophets of Advent. She looks at stirrings. She looks at approaching 8 practices to make Advent better. And then a wonderfully written conclusion. These practices and longings and yearnings that she describes in this book helps frame the Advent season rather than being sort of a count day and down to how many days till Christmas, just a kind of how many shopping days are left, till you buy your gifts. Moving away from that to living into the embodied longing that we experience through rituals and candles and hopes to remind us to wait for the coming of Christ, for the longing for expectation to be fulfilled. This waiting business really is an important kind of quiet time for Advent. And we get into some of the hustle and bustle of Christmas, and it erodes this wonderfully meaningful human experience of longing and waiting. So she puts our eyes on that. It's one of my favorite books. I have a bigger book by Fleming, Rutledge, that are sermons from Advent. That's one of my all-time favorite books ever. But if you can't wade through the big Fleming, Rutledge sermons on Advent, that's simply called Advent, this is a great way to begin. Advent, the Season of Hope, by Tish Harrison Warren, in the Esau McCulley series called The Fullness of Time. And it's the first one in that series. So I'm big on this one. I know you didn't grow up with this stuff. Neither did I really, Phil, but it's working for you, right? Isn't there some sense to this? Doesn't it sort of spiritually ring true that we start our season with the coming of Jesus and orient our lives around this longing and waiting? That rings true for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those aha moments that, of course, it should, right? Of course, we should look at time differently. We should look at the seasons differently. We should look at Christmas even differently, right? Like that's a shift I had to make here in kind of my midlife now, I guess, if you will, of, why? Like, why do we celebrate the seasons without considering like what Jesus has to say about the seasons? And so
Yeah.
I still feel really new to this. I can't lend a lot of wisdom or advice on it just yet. But you mentioned the candles in there and the four different aspects of it. We practice that now with the kids. We light the candle at dinner time and we just talk a little bit about what that week's theme means to us as a
Yeah.
family. So we'll be
Yeah.
talking about hope all week this week at the
Yeah.
dinner table in 6-year-old terms, 11-year-old terms, and then 40-something terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's it's definitely made a difference in the way that we view the holidays as a family now.
And those Bible Project videos on Advent, they are spectacular. They are so wise and good, looking at hope and what hope means. It's not the same as optimism. And there's this expecting, sort of longing, sort of waiting for fulfillment. And God is a God of promises made and promises kept. And so we can live into that expectation that God will be faithful. We trust in God, not in our own ability to be happy or optimistic. And so that's what this book helps us remember. If you want to frame your Advent season, the time leading up to Christmas, for those that follow this sort of stuff liturgically, the color in Advent is purple. And so you have purple candles and then a white one in the middle for Jesus. Curiously, it's the same color as Lent. And Lent leading up to Easter is a time of fasting and prayer. And in the early church, they fasted a lot before Christmas. So it's curious that
Mhm.
there's some sort of sober connections between Advent's longing and Lent's honesty. That we aren't there yet, and we've got some work to do, and we've got to have some spiritual formation to prepare us for the great, glorious resurrection of Jesus. And so, in that sober season of Lent, we practice the same purple colors as we do in Advent, and people fast during Advent too, as we prepare to move into the feast. Well, this Advent book is so good, and Tish Harrison Warren is wonderful. Read anything that she does. But the next one in the series is actually Christmas. It's by Emily Hunter McGowin. And this one, again, in the series, edited by Esau McCulley. Emily Hunter McGowin is a professor of theology at Wheaton College, where Esau is. And in the subtitle of this one is called The Season of Life and Light. And you may know this, and most people do, that Christmas is not just one day. You got the 12 days of Christmas, and that isn't just a goofy song about 12 birds singing or whatever the heck that is. It isn't just the 12 days or 12th night from Shakespeare, right? Because in the medieval church, they celebrated a feast for 12 days. And so Christmas is Christmas time, not just Christmas Day. And this book unpacks the history and the theology of the incarnation and this wondrous exchange, as they call it, of our sin for Christ's righteousness, and how his incarnation makes that happen. Of all the seasons in the church calendar, Christmas is the one that's most recognized and celebrated, but yet I think misunderstood. Because we think one day it's over, we put our trees out Christmas, Christmas night sometimes. Oh, no. 12 days. And this book is celebrating those 12 days, trying to beautifully, it's written really nicely, sort of offer a discerning and insightful way to get away from the consumerism that it's a bunch of just gift giving, and then that's the end of it. And so it's a plumbing in a really nice short way, in a beautifully written way, in a discerning way, how to sort of navigate the joys of Christmas gift giving with family, sure, particularly if you got little kids, the Santa Claus stuff, but how to sort of make the feast of Christmas time, the celebration of Christmas time, be all that it can be. And it's a season of life and light, as she puts it. Let me read, Phil, just a little piece here from one of the endorsements. One of the people that loves it is a guy named Jin Cho, an Asian American Anglican priest. He has has a podcast called the Micah Podcast, actually. But here's what he says. Listen to this. He says, as a pastor, I used to dread the Christmas season in fear that the church had lost the narrative. In the book Christmas, Emily Hunter McGowin masterfully blends her theological mind and her pastoral heart and goes a long way towards reclaiming the story and its full meaning. She breaks the knot of syrupy sentimentalism and rampant consumerism and commercialism, not with a snub or a judgment, but with a generous re-sanctification of our traditions that creates space for us to experience the life and light of this treasured time of year. With this book in hand, I can't wait to enter the next Christmas season. I don't know if that rings true to you, but it does to me that we have often, maybe because I work in retail, but that we have often sort of had this mixed feeling of enjoying the Advent season and the expectation of the goodness of Christmas and after Christmas sales and stuff. But geez, when you talk about commercialism and all the after Christmas sales, the day after Christmas, we'd have to go back into work and put up all our after Christmas savings signs, for the holiday after Christmas. It sort of allowed us or kept us from spiritually living into Christmas the way we wanted to. And when you work in retail, I mean, it's your job, so it's what we do. But to re-sanctify that, as he puts it in his review of this book, that she doesn't like just shake her finger at commercialism, but she sort of restates it as a good thing if properly understood. That gift giving and eating food and going to parties is part of what it's about. I mean, to honor and celebrate and feast in a time of the glorification of Jesus, the wonderful glory that breaks out at Christmas time. So I like her call to renewed rituals to stretching out the holiday, to re-sanctifying these things that we tend to do in the American culture and make them more uniquely Christian, that's consistent with the way of Jesus. So I love this book. It's odd. It came out last year. We celebrated it. We talked about it. Some people obviously like the whole series of this book edited by Esau, but I don't think it sold as well as the Advent one. And I think, again, people think, well, it's over in one day. Why bother? Or even a book about 12 days. Why bother read a book about just 12 days? But I'm telling you what, you will never celebrate Christmas quite the same way again after you understand its depth. This is not a recounting of the Christmas narrative necessarily, like you've seen 100 times. This is looking at the season of light and life and what it means for all of us today, and how we can sort of enter into this vulnerability of Jesus being born and the incarnation. You have chili con carne, it's Latin for meat. And that's what the incarnation is. Jesus puts on flesh. I mean, literally puts on meat on his body. And so this celebration of the worldliness of the incarnation and the vulnerability of the baby, and then moving into that as we celebrate it as a good thing. I love this little book, and I can't say enough about it. It's by Emily Hunter McGowin, a theologian at Wheaton, and it's in this season, Fullness of Time series that Esau did. So it's my second book of the year, Christmas time.
Yeah, great.
You ever do the 12 days of Christmas, Bill?
No, I've never done the 12 days of Christmas. It's still a relatively new concept to me as well. Actually,
Yeah.
mutual friend of ours, Billy Farrell, was the first one to ever really mention the reality of Christmas being a 12-day feast, and that's always stuck in my head that it was Billy that introduced it to me just like 10 years ago-ish.
He was raised Lutheran, and the Lutherans get this stuff. It's there. The Protestant denominations like Anglicans and Episcopalians, they sort of get it. And so it doesn't surprise me that Billy grew up a little with that. Well, I mean, we just do it again laughingly. You got 12 days to celebrate. You got parties, you got joy, you got gift giving. Just like at Hanukkah, little kids unpack little gifts every day at Hanukkah. I mean, we can do that too. So I'm all about giving, gifts to the 12 days of Christmas. If people wonder about, I'm going to order a book and it might be too late. They order something from Book Notes from my newsletter, the day before Christmas. Is it going to get here in time? I'm like, you got 12 days. You can, with great joy, give out gifts after Christmas Day, and you'll be being righteous when you do it. So I'm all about giving gifts late, because it honors this 12 days season that we have of a celebration and joy. Now, of course, what's quirky in there is we have New Year's in the middle of that, and that sort of steals some of the thunder. But I'm for Christians celebrating, in the historic Black church, they have, they have first night services, where they pray all night, Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. There's something to that, celebrating the year Christianly and putting it in the context of Christmastide. So yeah, there you go. I love this little white book, Christmas by Emily McGowin. And that leads then into the next one in the series, because at the end of the 12 days of Christmas, and it's still part of the Christmas season, most churches, some overlook it, but it's great preaching this time of year for Epiphany. Epiphany is two things, I think, historically. It's the day when we celebrate when the wise men came. We three kings of Orient are, and that is really rich. I mean, just think of the gifts they brought for a king, for a priestly sacrifice. And of course, the embalming fluid, so to speak, to give a pretext to his death, a pre-warning of his death. So his royal reign and his priestly sacrifice and his death are the three gifts that the wise men gave, the frankincense and myrrh. So that day when the wise men come from the east, the global world watching this celebration of Jesus, what a feast that can be, this idea of wrapping your head around people from other pagan cultures coming to worship Jesus and reminding we ordinary folks of his death. So man, what a day that is. But it's also the day of light, when we realize with the Epiphany, the star, the light, the recognition of who Jesus really is. So Epiphany is a huge day for gift giving, for celebrating who he really is, prophet, priest, and king, and the glory of light. And so this book by Fleming Rutledge is called Epiphany, in this same series edited by Esau McCulley. The Season of Glory is the subtitle. I mentioned at the outset that one of my all-time favorite books is a collection of sermons by Fleming Rutledge called Advent. The subtitle is The Once and Future Coming of Jesus, Jesus the Christ. And that big collection of a lifetime of sermons that she preached over the Advent season is really, really rich. And it ends with a couple Epiphany sermons. And so they asked her to be the one to contribute this volume of what the heck is the season Epiphany? What goes on there? What's it about? What's its biblical basis? What's its theological content? We have beheld his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father. It's kind of a beginning of John, it says Jesus moved into the neighborhood and we beheld his glory in the prologue of the Gospel of John. Well, what does it mean that Christmas celebrates his incarnation? Epiphany manifests his glory. Oh man, this is a great little book. Fleming Rutledge was one of the first women ordained into the Episcopal Church. They were late to the game, as many Protestant denominations were, of recognizing the righteous gifts of women to preach. And she was ordained as an Episcopal priest and is now in her 80s. I count her as a friend. She's a scholar. She was raised in the South. She knows her stuff and is a great, eloquent preacher. Fleming Rutledge, you can't go wrong with her stuff. And this little slim book, it may be one of her smaller books, on the nature of Epiphany and what it means to live into the season of glory. There's a close reading of Scripture here. There's some good study theologically, and then a little bit of practical stuff about why and how best to celebrate the season of Epiphany, starting with Epiphany Sunday, which is sort of, for many, the end of the Christmas season, Christmas tide, and then it begins to move into the Epiphany season. Can I read a blurb from this book that describes why it's so good? This is by a guy named Todd Billings. Todd is a Reformed Christian at the Reformed seminary called Western, which is in Hope, Michigan. Holland, Michigan, rather. It's where Hope College is as well. And Todd wrote a book on lament. He was working on a book on lament and got terminal cancer. And so it became somewhat of a memoir of his own dealing with his humanity and his mortality and being sick as he's writing about the Psalms of Lament. It's a powerful book. Todd lived. He still has cancer, but he lived, and he continues to write. He's a really rich writer, and anything Todd Billings does is well worth reading. And he has a very long endorsement of this book, and I'd like to read it for you. He says here, in the book Epiphany, Fleming Rutledge shows how recovering a delight in the glory of God in the person of Jesus Christ is, as he quotes, needed by the church right now as a drowning person needs a lifeboat. Written with joyful urgency, yet patient wisdom, this book should be required reading, at least for pastors seeking to recover the wonder of Epiphany. Veterans and newcomers to celebrating the liturgical year will find a treasure of biblical and theological insight in this succinct yet potent work. Moreover, anyone who aches for an alternative to the empty glories, in quotes, so widely pursued today will be nourished by this exposition of the strange yet beautiful reality of God's resplendent glory displayed in the crucified Christ. Isn't that a rich quote, that we have this resplendent glory that's better than any of the glories of this world, and it's seen in the face of a suffering servant, Jesus, the crucified one? That's the glory of Epiphany, that God himself takes on flesh, is incarnated in the world, and then is lifted up on a cross and is given a crown, which is a crown of thorns. Oh, the mysterious glory of Christ. We could talk about that all day. And Epiphany is the beginning of that narrative of understanding who Jesus really is as the one who manifests the glory of God in the person of the suffering Jesus. Man, this is a rich, rich book. It's a small little book. So we got 3 of them here, Phil, each in this series of the fullness of time, each introducing different aspects of the liturgical calendar. And this is a trio that all kind of hit together over the next month or so. And so these are resources to help you make your next couple of months that much better. I can't say enough about them, and I'm glad to talk about them here. They're all 20% off. I just think this one on the glory of Christ by getting that Epiphany is a gem.
Great. Thanks, Byron. I'm a big fan of quizzing students on this little bit of trivia. This is going to seem out of left field, but follow me here quick. So, the only mention that Jesus makes of his own birth at least to my knowledge, right? Like I've done a little research on this. The only mention is to Pilate at the end of the book of John. And John or Pilate says, "You are a king then." And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And when we put Jesus's birth in the perspective that he has on his own birth, of there's this exposition to truth that Pilate is staring right in the face of, and then Pilate says, "What is truth?" Which is amazing. But what I love about these books and what I've loved about my own learning about Advent is that there's a truth about what we believe that exists in our mind and our words. But then when I bring my body and my practice and the lighting of candles and the waiting into my recognition of truth, right? So it's not just thoughts and words. It's actually like something
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
practice on the calendar. I learn a little bit more about truth then. I get to
Oh,
hear a little
so
bit
well
more
put.
about Jesus then. And it's these
Yeah,
sort of books that I want to also commend and saying when we get our minds wrapped around the Advent season this way, at Christmas and Epiphany, we get to hear Jesus a little bit more, not just in scripture, but in the way that we wait, in the way that we light
yeah,
candles, in the way that we celebrate Christmas for 12 days instead of one, and in the ways that we think about stars and gifts and gift giving being something
yep,
incarnational. And I think Jesus
yep.
testifies to that right in front of Pilate,
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. And it is interesting. That's near his death. That's in his
right
trial.
before his death.
So again,
Yeah.
Jesus linking his birth to even his death and his
Yeah.
meaning of coming so that he could do that very deed to bring truth to the world. Yeah, that's rich stuff. Thanks, Phil. And I wasn't going to say this because it's a fourth book, but I got to say this because of what you just
Go
said.
ahead.
The
Go
next
ahead.
one coming in this series is going to come hopefully before Christmas. Its official release date is January, and it's the final one. There's one on Pentecost, there's one on Easter, of course. The one that we don't have in this series yet is called Ordinary Time. And it's that season when not much is going on, it seems, in the life of Jesus, but is our ordinary response to all of that life of Jesus stuff. And so the ordinariness of ordinary time is, the season after Pentecost, living in the power of the Spirit for the sake of witness in the world. It's missional. But it also is this ordinary stuff that it's embodied. We're living out our faith in the kind of mundane stuff of ordinary life. I have not read this yet. It's by Amy Peeler, and it's coming in January, but we here at Hearts and Minds, I'm sure we'll have it early, and that'll be the last in this whole set of books edited by Esau McCulley. So look forward to that one next. Ordinary Time, that is the season after Pentecost and all that, sort of in the late spring, as we lead up then to Advent. So it's the second half of the year, and that book is going to be released in January through InterVarsity Press. We're thrilled to have it when it comes, and it'll be complete, this whole series of books that we're talking about.
Thanks, Byron. Thanks for sneaking that one in there as well. I always appreciate those snuck in books. And thanks again for these
Pre-order.
There you go. Well, there is, our ordinary is extraordinary with you, Byron. And I always appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put into these recommendations. And as is ordinary on this show, any of the books mentioned in this podcast are 20% off when you order them. The order link will be the first link that you see in the show notes, no matter what platform you are tuning in on. So make sure to click on that link. I'll also make sure that I have links to that hour-long podcast. I'll put links into the Bible Project in there. They didn't ask for that, but we'll do it anyway. And so anything that basically we mentioned today should be in the show notes as well. So make sure you check out the show notes when you're done with this episode. And while you're at it, make some comments, share the episode with a friend. I mean, what a great time to share this episode with a friend or a family member, because who doesn't want books at Christmas time? I mean, I definitely have my own distinct book list that I always give people for Christmas time. So if you're looking for book ideas, gift ideas, this is a great way to get those conversations going as well with your family and friends by sharing this episode and talking about it with others. And of course, read these books. And if you do, feel free to send comments to Byron or myself. Our emails are in the description as well. So on behalf of Byron and Hearts and Minds and myself and the CCO, thanks once again for tuning in to this episode of the Three Books, Hearts and Minds podcast.